Thank you for tuning into the Pictures of Lily podcast. I'm your host, Lily Moayeri. I've been a music journalist since 1992, and I interview a lot of music-related people. This podcast is about my experience behind the story, my experience doing the interviews, just to give you a snapshot of what it's like on the other side of the digital recorder.
Pictures of Lily.
Thank you, everyone, for giving our podcast a listen. There are a lot of options for you out there, and we appreciate your choosing us for 10-ish minutes. As always, thanks to those of you who have subscribed or followed us on any of the podcast platforms. You can find us on every platform by going to pod.link/Pictures of Lily podcast or directly from picturesoflily.com. You can also find us on SoundCloud and on YouTube. In this episode, I will be talking about the interview I did with the two people responsible for the amazing music you hear on the hit series Killing Eve. Producer, composer, and DJ David Holmes and music supervisor Catherine Grieves, whom I spoke to for Flood magazine.
One day I just stopped crying, one day I just stopped. One day I just forgot. And when I remembered, I wondered why. Why is it wrong? Feels right.
Here are a few snapshots of my experience interviewing David and Catherine. This was my first time speaking to Catherine, but I've known David for years, way back to his first artist album, This Film's Crap, Let's Slash the Seats, when it was originally released domestically in 1998. At the time, David and I went to Fred Segal, which is a high-end, unreasonably expensive department store here in Los Angeles. David picked out a couple of t-shirts and we didn't see a price on them, but we figured they were just t-shirts, so how expensive could they be? When we went to the register, the total was over $400, which meant each t-shirt was $200. I raised hell at the register, making so much noise about $200 t-shirts, which David was also in shock over, but he was more in shock over how much I was embarrassing him in public. David went on to score numerous soundtracks for film and television, most notably the Ocean's 11, 12, and so on for Steven Soderbergh. He also produced Noel Gallagher from Oasis's last solo album, Who Built the Moon, which brought a lot of credibility back to Noel as David really pushed him into unfamiliar and uncomfortable musical territory, which ultimately paid off for Noel as a songwriter. David has a band called Unloved with his close friends Keefus Chancia and Jade Vincent. I interviewed the three of them when their debut album, Guilty of Love, was released in 2016. I loved their music, but as amazing as it is, I didn't feel it had any chance to get into the mainstream consciousness. And then David got tapped to work on the music for Killing Eve by Catherine Grieves, who is a seasoned music supervisor. She told me this: from the beginning, everybody involved wanted music to be a big part of Killing Eve. It was such a bold script and such a bold premise, it needed somebody confident who could really drive the drama. David put a folder of music together that he felt would be a match for the show and threw a few Unloved tracks in there. When he got the edit back with the music, there was a bunch of Unloved tracks cut to picture. So he didn't force his band onto the soundtrack, but they are a perfect fit, and all the attention I felt Unloved deserved, they were finally getting with Killing Eve. This is what David told me about that. It's like winning the musical lottery. The marriage between Unloved and Killing Eve works. It's as if every track was written for it, but, in fact, none of the tracks were. They had been done in almost different decades. It worked out brilliantly for our band. These things don't happen very often, and we're very grateful.
You've got this strange effect on me, and I like it.
Unloved already had 2 albums plus a bunch more music written before Killing Eve started. almost all of which can be found on the official BBC Killing Eve playlist on Spotify. David and Kiefer also composed the score for the series, which, at this point, they do ahead of filming. They don't even read the script ahead of time, although Catherine does tell them where the filming locations are and any key scenes they should know about. When Kiefer and David get the visual, they find pieces in the music they've composed that fit around what they're seeing. This is what David told me about that. Some of the best work I've done scoring is when the music was done before the film was shot. It's not just about the script. It's about understanding the world, the emotion of the world, the characters. Once I get that into my head, I feel my way through it rather than think my way through it. I'm constantly gathering information by speaking to a director. I want to hear the broad strokes and the simple emotion of the style, of what they're trying to say. All that information helps me just as much as reading the script. And this is what Catherine told me. David has the most insane record collection. If he has an idea for a song he thinks would work better than anything he could write, then he'll want to use that song, which is different to most composers who would say, use my score cue. He has this overview which makes him really brilliant to work with. We can bounce ideas off each other, and it means we can put on a united front if we really believe in a track. It's easier for us to talk other people around. Not that it's particularly difficult on Killing Eve, everybody sings from the same hymn sheet on the whole, but music is all down to people's tastes, and it's so divisive that not everybody will agree. We make sure we fight battles that we feel are really important. I love the term singing from the same hymn sheet. I'd never heard it before speaking to Catherine. Catherine and David have won a Hollywood Music and Media Award for their work on Killing Eve, and David and Kiefer have won a BAFTA for their score. This is on top of the numerous Ivor Novello Awards David has won for songwriting. If I'm being perfectly honest, as much as I've always loved David's music and believed in his talent, I never thought he would get this much recognition for it, and it just renews my faith that good music will rise to the top eventually. And that's my snapshot of my experience interviewing David Holmes and Catherine Grieves. The full feature is online at floodmagazine.com, and it's linked on picturesoflily.com. Also on picturesoflily.com is the LA Weekly feature I did on Unloved when the first album was released, and maybe someday I'll have the 1998 interview I did with David up there too. Next episode, I will be talking about my experience interviewing Damon Gough, better known as Badly Drawn Boy, for Under the Radar. From myself and my co-producer, director, editor, Lawrence Schroeder, thanks for listening. And once again, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe or follow our podcast on any of the podcast platforms, please do so. And please rate and review. You can connect to us using pod.link/picturesoflilypodcast, and that will take you to your podcast platform of choice. You can also find us on SoundCloud and YouTube if you prefer, and you can find the playlist for the podcast on Spotify and YouTube. Once again, thanks for listening.
Pictures of Lily.